In the early morning hours in Battle Creek, the day began as in so many other Midwestern American towns at the end of the 19th century. The still low light streamed through the dirt streets, reflecting off the simple wood and brick facades and encountering people already on the move. Opening shops, preparing wagons, heating wood-burning stoves. The predominant sound was not that of large machines, but of footsteps, creaking doors, and short conversations between neighbors who knew each other by name. The town lived off the rhythm of local commerce, the surrounding agriculture, and small industries, without the appearance of a religious center or historical destination. To the inattentive passerby, Battle Creek might seem like just another inconspicuous point on the map of Michigan. Among the residents, there was a group whose routine was distinguished not by special clothing or buildings, but by carefully organized habits. Members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church began their day early, not out of formal obligation, but because of a culture of discipline that had been consolidated over the decades. In many homes, breakfast was simple, consisting of fruits, cereals, and bread, prepared without haste in partial silence, while local newspapers were browsed and the day's commitments were mentally organized. Food, understood as part of daily life, reflected ideas widely debated in the city about health, temperance, and self-control, themes that already circulated far beyond the Adventist environment. After the initial domestic chores, paths diverged. Some men went to printing shops, warehouses, or administrative offices connected to community-run institutions. Others walked to nearby fields or commercial establishments common to the city, where they worked side by side with people of different faiths. Women, in addition to domestic responsibilities, were increasingly involved in educational, nursing, and internal organizational activities, reflecting gradual changes in the role of women within American society during that period. None of this occurred in isolation. Battle Creek was a space of constant interaction, where religious affiliation did not suspend civil life. A significant portion of daily activity converged on the Battle Creek Sanitarium, whose physical and symbolic presence shaped urban life. From early morning, employees arrived to begin their shifts, patients circulated through the gardens and corridors, and visitors curiously observed this complex that blended hospital, habit school, and practical research center. The sanitarium was not a silent or solemn space. There were conversations, instructions, the sounds of utensils, and the constant coming and going of people from different states. For local Adventists, working there was part of a common professional routine, even though the place carried a growing national reputation. Meanwhile, in the areas near the printing presses, the sound of the presses marked another rhythm of the day. Typesetters aligned metal letters, proofreaders checked texts, and packages of periodicals were prepared for shipment. The work was meticulous, repetitive, and demanded constant attention. Many of those who worked there did not see their task as something extraordinary, but as a regular occupation, sustained by modest wages and defined hours. The circulation of printed ideas was part of the city's daily life, not only among Adventists, but also among readers of secular newspapers who shared the same urban spaces. Throughout the morning, Battle Creek maintained a continuous flow of informal encounters. In the streets, quick greetings. In the markets, exchanges of news. In the institutional corridors, administrative decisions. The figure of Ellen G. White, when present in the city, integrated into this environment without public ceremony. She walked, wrote, received correspondence, and attentively observed the workings of the institutions, recording impressions that would later become historical sources. Her presence did not interrupt the urban rhythm. It was part of it, perceived naturally by those who lived daily with her activities. As the day progressed, lunch marked a collective pause. Workers returned to their homes or simple dining halls, meals were shared, and a momentary silence replaced the noise of tasks. There was no visible distinction between an Adventist and a non-Adventist home during this interval. What one saw was a functioning city, organized around work, family, and shared expectations of stability and progress. Differences in belief remained discreet, incorporated into personal habits and not constant public displays. During the afternoon, the cycle repeated itself with minimal variations. Mail was delivered, classes were held, medical appointments continued, and reports were filled out. Battle Creek followed its regular course, sustained by a combination of domestic routines, professional commitments, and close social relationships. Nothing in the scene immediately indicated that this simple daily life was linked to broader debates about religion, health, and social organization that were sweeping the country at that historical moment. It was in this environment of persistent normalcy that silent decisions and daily practices gradually shaped the character of the community, preparing the ground for transformations that were yet to be revealed. As the afternoon wore on in Battle Creek, the city entered a period of quiet continuity. The moderate warmth of the milder months or the dry chill of winter shaped people's rhythm without substantially altering their commitments. The streets remained active, but without haste. Children returned from school walking in small groups, while adults resumed tasks interrupted by the midday break. Urban life was not organized around landmark events, but around a predictable succession of daily obligations that gave the community a sense of stability. In Adventist homes, the afternoon was dedicated to housework, reading, and practical planning. Many houses maintained an atmosphere of simple order with functional furniture and few decorative objects. Time was valued as a limited resource, and the organization of the routine reflected this perception. It was not a matter of social isolation or withdrawal from the rest of the city, but of adapting to a culture of self-control that coexisted with common habits of the period. Open windows allowed one to hear the same sounds of carts, street vendors, and hurried footsteps that echoed throughout Battle Creek. In community-based institutions, work followed a regular administrative pattern. Offices dealt with increasing correspondence, financial records, and logistical decisions that demanded constant attention. The volume of letters sent and received was significant, indicating the gradual expansion of the influence of the ideas produced there. Even so, for the employees, daily activity was limited to repetitive tasks, opening envelopes, responding to requests, filing documents. The notion of participating in something larger rarely interfered with the immediate execution of the work. At Battle Creek Sanitarium, the afternoons were filled with consultations, supervised exercise, and care routines. Patients walked through the corridors or gardens, following medical guidelines that emphasized regular habits. Nurses and assistants maintained a calm and purposeful tone, attentive to schedules and individual needs. The atmosphere blended discipline and informality, lacking the rigid hospital environment that would become common decades later. For the local workers, this space represented just another stable job in a growing city. Meanwhile, in the printing workshops associated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the pace remained constant. Printing periodicals and books required continuous concentration, and the smell of ink mingled with the heat generated by the machines. Manual labor was valued, and many apprentices acquired technical skills that could be used in other urban contexts. The presence of these printing workshops did not isolate the workers from the rest of the city. On the contrary, they integrated into the local economy, employing residents who moved between different sectors throughout their lives. As the sun began to set, the flow of people shifted again. Workers left their posts, shops adjusted their hours, and families prepared for the end of the day. The return home was not marked by grand rituals, but by simple actions, closing doors, organizing utensils, preparing the evening meal. In many homes, reading occupied an important space, both newspapers and available books. The practice was not exclusive to Adventists, but among them, there was a greater emphasis on regular reading as part of daily domestic life. Ellen G. White's presence, when observed during this time of day, was discreet. She spent long hours writing, revising manuscripts, or dictating texts to assistants. Her work did not interrupt the domestic environment, it adapted to it. Letters were answered in the gradually diminishing natural light, and notes were taken with attention to the details of what was happening around her. These records, produced amidst the ordinary routine, would later become relevant documents for the historical understanding of the period. As evening approached, Battle Creek took on a quieter tone. The streets gradually emptied, illuminated by still, irregular streetlights. Conversations arose on porches, and neighbors exchanged impressions about the weather, work, and local events. There was no constant sense of urgency or expectation of extraordinary events. The city seemed content with its predictability, and the Adventists immersed in this context shared this same feeling of normalcy. The end of the day brought with it a natural continuity of what had been experienced since the morning. Routines were completed without distinction, and the overall impression was of a community organized around consistent habits and close relationships. This daily pattern, repeated countless times, created a stable backdrop against which institutional and social changes began to take shape almost imperceptibly. As night fell in Battle Creek, daily life took on an even more reserved tone. Houses were lit by lamps or rudimentary electric light, and the domestic interior became the center of activity. The often harsh external climate reinforced the need to stay indoors for long months of the year. Families settled into modest rooms, where furniture served practical functions and the silence was punctuated by short conversations and familiar household sounds. The end of the day did not represent a rupture, but a tranquil continuation of what had been experienced since morning. Among Adventists, the evening period was marked by predictable habits. The evening meal was usually simple, prepared in advance and shared without formalities. The food reflected choices common to the community, but did not ostentatiously differ from the local standard. After the meal, basic tasks were completed, utensils organized, and the space prepared for rest. The rhythm was dictated by the need to wake up early the next day, and not by extensive social commitments or frequent public activities. Reading occupied a significant space during this time. Local newspapers, letters received in the mail, and available books were consulted by the soft light of oil lamps. This habit was not exclusive, but it was part of a domestic culture that valued written information as a means of keeping up with the world beyond Battle Creek. National and international news arrived late, filtered by time and distance, which gave the information a more reflective than immediate character. Daily life continued without the constant pressure of external events. On some nights, small gatherings took place in homes or community spaces, always in a restrained manner. Conversations revolved around work, health, children's education, and practical matters of urban life. There was no rigid separation between subjects considered religious and secular. Both naturally blended into daily dialogue. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, as an institutional structure, remained in the background of these interactions, appearing only as an organizational reference and not as the exclusive center of social life. Behind the scenes at the institutions, even after the formal closing of the workday, some activities continued. Correspondence was finalized, reports revised, and plans for the following days organized. This extension of work into the night reflected practical necessity more than explicit idealism. Battle Creek, as a growing city, demanded constant attention from those who managed its institutions, and this manifested itself silently within homes and offices. Ellen G. White, in this context, maintained a routine aligned with the rest of the community. Evenings were frequently dedicated to writing and organizing manuscripts. Intellectual work took place in common environments without formal isolation. The sound of pen on paper and reading aloud for revision were integrated into the domestic environment. These seemingly ordinary moments resulted in records that today offer a detailed view of daily life and the practical concerns of that period. Nighttime rest came early for most. Silence spread through the streets, interrupted only by occasional footsteps or the wind. Battle Creek was not a city that stayed up late. Its dynamics followed the natural cycles of light and work. Sleep was understood as an essential part of the routine, necessary to sustain the continuous efforts required by the following day. This regularity contributed to the sense of order that characterized the community. As the seasons changed, this pattern repeated itself with slight variations. In winter, the time spent indoors was longer. In summer, the nights allowed for some time outdoors. Even so, the basic structure of the day remained the same. The predictability of daily life was not seen as a limitation, but as a basis for maintaining family and professional life. Adventists, living in this environment, shared the same expectations and concerns as their neighbors. By observing this continuous daily cycle, it becomes evident that Battle Creek functioned more as a stable social organism than as a center of exceptional events. The discrete and repetitive nightly routines reinforced community ties and created an environment conducive to institutional continuity. It was in this regular silence at the end of the day that habits and decisions were consolidated which, over time, would influence the development of the city and its organizations. As morning returned to Battle Creek, the daily cycle began again with almost no perceptible variation. Dawn found the city in a state of tranquil continuity, as if the previous day had merely been paused. The cool or damp air, common to the region, shaped the first movements of the day. Doors were opened, stoves were lit, and footsteps once more marked their presence on the streets. This repetition did not cause strangeness. On the contrary, it offered predictability in a period of rapid social transformations in the United States. Among Adventists, the beginning of the day followed this same regular pattern. Waking up occurred early, often before sunrise, not due to external imposition, but due to established habit. Initial domestic activities were carried out with economy of gestures and words. There was constant attention to the use of time, perceived as a practical resource necessary for maintaining family and professional life. Daily life was not guided by extraordinary expectations, but by the need to accomplish concrete tasks. As the hours passed, the city reorganized itself around its main work hubs. The Battle Creek Sanitarium resumed its routine early in the morning, with staff arriving in defined shifts and patients following established schedules. The place, although known beyond the city limits, was experienced internally as a functional space. Gardens were tended, equipment prepared, and records updated. The repetition of these tasks sustained institutional stability and ensured its continuous operation. In the areas related to printing and administration, the activity also restarted without ceremony. The printing presses resumed the sound of their machines, and the offices filled with papers, diaries, and correspondence. Workers sat at the same desks, reviewed the same types of documents, and dealt with problems similar to those of the previous day. The presence of the Seventh-day Adventist Church manifested itself in this environment in an administrative and operational way, not as a public spectacle, but as a structure that organized people, resources, and routines. Coexistence with the rest of the population of Battle Creek remained constant. Adventists and non-Adventists shared urban spaces, markets, streets, and workplaces. Differences in belief rarely translated into visible separations in daily life. What prevailed was the common experience of living in a medium-sized city, facing similar economic, climatic, and social challenges. Religious identity emerged more as a backdrop than as a central element of daily interactions. Within this context, Ellen G. White continued to play a discrete yet constant role. Her routine was integrated into the regular functioning of the city. She wrote in the early hours of the day, revised texts, received visitors in an organized manner, and attentively observed the workings of the institutions. Her records were not produced in isolation, but amidst everyday life, reflecting practical concerns, administrative decisions, and impressions of the social environment. Over time, these writings would become important sources for understanding the internal dynamics of the community. As the weeks passed, the feeling of continuity was reinforced. Dates repeated themselves on the calendar, appointments returned, and familiar faces remained present in the same places. This constancy did not mean an absence of tensions or challenges, but it indicated a way of facing them without abrupt ruptures. Battle Creek functioned like a city in gradual adaptation, and the Adventists immersed in this process actively participated in its daily construction. A close observation of this ordinary day reveals that the city's historical impact did not originate from isolated events, but from the sum of daily practices repeated over time. Regular work, administrative decisions, domestic habits, and social interaction created an environment conducive to institutional development. None of this seemed exceptional to those who lived there, but in retrospect, these elements offer a deeper understanding of Battle Creek's role in the American religious and social landscape of the late 19th century. In concluding this portrait of a typical day, it becomes evident that the historical strength of the community lay not in moments of rupture, but in the silent persistence of its routines. It was in this stable daily life, sustained by common habits and close relationships, that the foundations were formed for future changes that were not yet fully visible at that historical moment. Over time, this ordinary day in Battle Creek remained recorded not for its extraordinary events, but for the constancy of its simple gestures. The city was not defined by a single decisive moment, but by the disciplined repetition of daily habits that shaped institutions, relationships, and expectations. The Adventists who lived there did not see themselves as protagonists of a broad historical chapter. They were residents dealing with work, family, weather, and responsibilities common to their time. It was precisely this persistent normality that allowed ideas, administrative practices, and organizational models to consolidate without disruption. Observed from a distance, this daily life reveals how historical processes are built gradually, sustained by silent routines and practical decisions that rarely attract attention while they are happening. In Battle Creek, the weight of history was born from the sum of ordinary days, repeated regularly, in a scenario that seemed stable, but which slowly prepared the way for future transformations.